like I lived under a rock because I hadn't heard of Colleen Hoover before they came to me with this movie. But the person that I was in the car with, Eden, when the gentleman I work with, Warren, called me and said, "Hey, you know, they're interested in you playing this character. Do you know Colleen Hoover and her books?" And Eden shrieked. She's 25 years old, and I thought, oh, that's so interesting that a 25-year-old who has access to every bit of information possible, everything you get on social media apps, all the streaming, all the optionality, you know, here's this name of this writer that cut through. That was interesting to me because, like, you know, in older generations, you know, everybody was listening to the same radio shows, you know, watching the same 30 channels. So now when the whole world is open to you, for a name to cut through like that to a younger generation really made me perk up. And then when he said the name of the book, she's like shrieked. And I was like, "Are you a fan of this book?" She was like, "I read her other books. I don't know that book, but that is the book that all of my friends are obsessed with. Everyone knows that." So she hadn't even read the book, but she shrieked when she heard the name. And then I ended up going to a local bookstore like an hour later in this tiny town, and the windows were just covered in Colleen Hoover, Colleen Hoover, Colleen Hoover, Colleen Hoover. And I thought, okay, I feel like the universe is trying to tell me something. So I read the script that night, and I just so fell in love with Lily, and I just wanted to tell her story so much, so many different ways where she could be portrayed, and her emotional roadmap was so strong and so potent. And what was important to me for Lily is that she didn't come into it from a delicate place, that she didn't come into it as somebody who was super vulnerable or susceptible to someone coming in and overwhelming her and traumatizing her, that she came in with real spice and sass and agency, and she had both feet on the ground and her head screwed on tight. And, you know, she's full of like levity and life and humor, but this is also a little jaded given what she's experienced in her life. And she's open and vulnerable. She has all of those colors, but she's not a delicate flower. She's not a wilting lily. She is a strong, empowered woman. So she's someone that you would look at and go, well, especially given her history, you know, she comes from a family that, you know, a childhood that has some trauma in it, and you see her say, well, that's never going to be me, and then you meet her as an adult and go, yeah, she means it. She knows what to look out for. She's not going to repeat those patterns. And then when she does, it's that much more devastating, and it shows that this could happen to anyone, and it does. Like, you know, I think that oftentimes when I think of films that have portrayed, you know, I mean, we'll call it what it is. It's you know, violence against women. They often paint a picture that's a bit more black and white, where this person is clearly the villain and this woman is clearly the victim, and you could see, like, how could she possibly experience that at this person's hands? Or when she does experience it, she's out right away and has a revelation. You don't normally see how gray it can be and how confusing it can be, and how you can be a woman with confidence and agency and know better and still not see all of the red flags that you should. And I think that, so it was really important to me. I felt once I read Lily's story, I wanted to tell it because I wanted to make sure that you meet her at a place where she doesn't feel overly vulnerable or delicate, or like the perfect picture of femininity. And, you know, Ryle's the perfect picture of like dominance and masculinity, and he's going to take her on this wild ride and she's going to be swept away. Like, it was important for me for her to sweep him off his feet, as much as, if not more, for him to sweep him off hers. And I felt like creating, like, leveling that playing field and making that feel more equal makes the relationship feel even more confusing when it goes off kilter, because she believes in the equality of their partnership and their strength as individuals and together. Everyone tends to want to talk about why this is such an important film and why it's so empowering, and I think that is really important. But I think what's beautiful about this film is there is every color of human emotion in it. There's levity, there's joy, there's humor, there's hope, there's pain, there's tragedy, there's violence, there's trauma, there's sadness, there's exaltation, there's life, there's death, there is like love, there's loss, there's just, I mean, really, like, it is a kaleidoscope of the human experience, and not just the female experience. Like, yes, this is Lily's story and this is her journey, but the men's characters in this movie are incredibly powerful, dynamic characters. My mother, you don't see her as much, but you really feel who she is and her journey. Young Lily, you really understand her, and so current Lily, my Lily, has her own beginning, middle, and end, and young Lily has her own beginning, middle, and end, and then you overlay those two and you see this bigger, more beautiful arc. And Allysa, played by Jenny Slate, you just like what female friendships mean, what somebody who like shows up for you means. And it just really is, it's a movie that I think can capture any age, any gender. It really, because it's so much just rooted in the human experience and emotions and feelings. And emotions, I think people tend to think like emotions is like emotional, like sad or tragic or drama. But really this has every color. And I think that that's why I think, grabs people like it does. And I think that, for the women I know who have seen this movie who have experienced any similar pain, whether exactly or adjacent to what Lily has experienced, have felt really seen by it. And I'm not saying every woman would, just the ones that I know that have seen that. And I also think what they've said to me is I want young women to see this, or women of all ages to see this, to know that A, they're not alone, and B, you can get out. And it feels so hard to get out. It feels impossible to get out. But you can. I mean, in the poster and throughout we say, you can break the pattern before the pattern breaks us. And I think that's like a more literary way to say it. But it's beautiful to see patterns and to see people see the patterns and go, I'm not going to do that, and then do it. And then some end it and some don't. And I think that there's real empathy for both sides there. It's not saying this is the only way, that you have to do it, and if you don't do it this way, you're judged. It's to say, like, we see you, like, life is murky, and yeah, we just want people to feel seen, and as hokey as it sounds, inspired. Like, I think it is ultimately very inspiring, and we didn't set out to tell an inspirational movie, because that feels a little like overly earnest. We just set out to tell a movie that really feels heartfelt and authentic, and makes you laugh and makes you cry and just makes you feel. It's tricky. Like, I'm a diehard. When I read a book, I want the movie to be exactly what the book is. But I also, my own imagination is always going to be different than, what someone else could intuit my imagination might be. And then sometimes I forget what was in my own imagination versus what's in a movie, because they start to blend together. But I think that what matters most to me as a fan is that the essence and the spirit of the people that I fell in love with are the people. Like, if the wall is green and lily blooms, but our wall is purple, it doesn't really matter. Like, if I'm a book reader, it's that the people I fell in love with, that the stories I fell in love with, that the journeys I fell in love with, that grabbed my heart and soul, end up on screen. And I really think that they do, and I think that even if it's not in the way that maybe in your imagination when you read the book, it may be exactly, but even if it isn't, I think the journey that ends up on screen is really beautiful. And so I think that this movie will lead a lot of non-readers to the book, and I think that readers who see this movie, I think will appreciate it. I think that they both work on their own as two separate pieces of art, but overlaying them, I think it's special. And I think that that's because Colleen was a very important part of this. Once the movie was made and it came time to, editing it and making sure that the finished product was felt like it honored her story that she wrote, and it honored the fans. She was very protective of the fans and their experience, and capturing the heart and soul and the essence and even details were really important to her. So she really had an advocate for the fans really had an advocate for them in Colleen in the post-production process. So my favorite set, I mean, it was definitely Lily Bloom's. That set is so beautiful. It looks nothing like this set, but this one is so beautiful too. And that's what I think is special. I mean, we talked about it at another time with Colleen, is that like everyone has a different vision or interpretation of what that is. And that's what I love. Like, I'm actually thrilled that this set isn't an exact replica of that one, because every reader had a different Lily Bloom's in their head. And I hope that we get to continue to have different Lily Bloom's pop-ups here and there, because there's going to be a different take on her creativity and who she is. And I want people to take Lily and overlay them into her life, the things that they love about her. And because I took some from Lily. Like, I really do love her. So I loved her set. I love Lily Bloom's. When we went in there, the wallpaper was this beautiful, I think it was Morris & Co. wallpaper. And they were like, oh yeah, so this is the decrepit French brasserie, and then we're gonna paint over it. And I was like, oh God, no, we can't paint over it. And they were like, well, this paint company's giving us money for the movie and we need it, because it was a very small budget movie. And we were like, okay, let's paint one wall, but can you leave this falling apart wallpaper? Because that's what Lily does, is she sees something that may be broken and she highlights the value in it. She can say, no, we can emphasize this beauty. We don't need to cover what's broken. We need to show it how valuable it is. So she does that with Atlas. She does that with, I imagine to an extent, she did it with her father. I mean, she does it with her mother. She does it with herself. She does it with Ryle. She does it with her flower shop. So she sees the beauty in something that, others may cast aside or think is tarnished. And so yeah, that was important to me. So I love Lily Bloom's. I love all the layers and the textures. And so yeah, that was definitely my happy space. And I got to actually arrange flowers while I was in there. We were rolling. I got to, do a whole montage where we're just building and creating and painting the walls. And so, a lot of that stuff was happening in real time. Obviously, I'm not, the production or set designer, but, they were filming us doing a lot of those pieces, and then they would come in and obviously make it incredible in what it is. But yeah, we got our hands dirty in there. So I loved being in Lily Bloom's. And I love being in this Lily Bloom's too. I was sad they didn't invite me to help set this up, because it's so pretty. I would have loved to have done this with them. Lily is very different than me. Her story is different than me. Yet at the same time, I brought more of myself to this movie than I ever have before. And I think that comes from probably a few things. I've been doing this for a long time, and when you start acting, you're, for some people out the gate are amazing. Like Isabella, who plays young Lily, I can't believe this is her first movie. She's just incredible in this. But that wasn't my experience. My experience is I was shy and nervous and didn't really, know what people wanted of me, and was supposed to bring a bit of myself to the table, but also be a different character. And it's, the more I work and the more I study my favorite actors, and I don't mean study in a studio sense, just watching movies and saying oh, I love watching Katharine Hepburn. I love watching Jimmy Stewart. There are people I love watching, yes, everyone talks about Meryl Streep, but for a reason, or Tom Hanks. And as much as they all disappear into their characters, you always feel Jimmy Stewart in a Jimmy Stewart movie. You always feel Meryl Streep. You always feel Katharine Hepburn. So my favorite people to watch are the people who always bring themselves, all of their most sparkly self to the table, and then overlay a character on top of that, versus completely hiding themselves. And it's incredible when people hide themselves and do transformations. But for me, what I end up being drawn to is that's what I want to watch, because I find more joy in that, and or the most joy in that. I mean, I also find joy in watching people transform, but for me, I see that as something I love to watch. So I thought, well, that's something I want to do, and And, I think that I'm a very shy person. I'm a very private person. And so I've never really wanted to put much of my personality into a character. You always get sprinkles of it, like I'll look like my character or dress like my character. But you don't really see a lot of me in the character. And I think that more than any movie I've ever done, like Lily is such a ball buster. I am rotten to the core when it comes to that. Like I am very, like if I'm not busting your balls, then you should be worried. Then I'm mad at you. Then I don't love you. And just the way that I sort of use humor and levity in moments of sadness or pain, because that's the prism through which I can cope and deflect. And I smile in sad moments because it's just how I process things. I'm not a person who has a lot of outward like rage or anger. Like I'll get upset about things, but I'm not yelly. I'm, quite even and patient. And so the way that I react to a situation, instead of doing like exactly what's on the page, if she's going to react this way, I may feel the exact same feeling, but I may not react the way that it's written that she reacts. And so I really tried to overlay the honesty of my heart and emotions onto Lily. And I think that that's why the performance is one that I'm very proud of, because it feels very authentic and true to like an emotional journey that I can track. And while I've it's silly to say I've been fortunate to not experience anything that Lily has, it shouldn't be fortunate, but it's all too often that women experience this. And so I think that the reason that it feels very authentic is because it was as if I were experiencing this. What would my heart feel? What would my reactions be? And that's what I tried to bring to it, because I felt like that was the way that I could give everyone the most authentic Lily. I speak like me. I move, this is the most time I move my hands, because I move my hands a lot in real life and my face. And when I'm acting, I try not to do that, because people in real life maybe don't move their hands as much, but I do. So I just let more of myself come through. And so I feel like, I feel like you can feel the authenticity in Lily, because she's not pretending to be someone. It's just the true feelings.
Well, originally, my dear friend and book agent, I'm going to shout out to Johanna Castillo, who also helped discover Colleen originally when she was at Atria Books. She sent me the book because she knew I was looking for content for Wayfair Studios that could really affect and touch people's lives. And so she sent me this book. It had this like pink flowery cover, and I had never read a romance novel before. So I remember getting into bed, I wrote a book called Man Enough, and yet I remember feeling like strangely not man enough to read this book. I was like kind of embarrassed. And my wife looks over and she's like, "What are you reading?" And I was like, Johanna sent it to me. It's supposed to be amazing. And the book at the time hadn't become like this massive global phenomenon. So I start reading, and boom, Ryle comes on the rooftop. We meet Lily. So I start reading, and we meet Lily Bloom. She's on this rooftop, and bam, Ryle comes in, and they start having this conversation, and it's like sexy and interesting. And I'm finding myself like suddenly understanding what so many millions of women gravitate to, and I'm gravitating to it. And I'm like, oh, I could read more romance novels. And as the book gets deeper and deeper, and kind of the layers of the onion are unpeeled, and you start to understand what the book is really about, I just remember having this moment of like, oh wow, I haven't ever seen anything like this. I actually recently went back and read all of our email exchanges from 5 years ago, from 2019. And it was a really interesting time because I started reading the book, but I was right in the middle of releasing my first film, 5 Feet Apart. And simultaneously, I was shooting a TV show that I was on called Jane the Virgin. And we had just had a baby, and things were just crazy. But I was so hooked on this book, and I was committed to finishing it, that it took me a little longer than I wanted to. So I would like start it, and I'd read 5 chapters, and then I'd have to go, and I couldn't get back to it for a week or so. So my emails to Colleen and our back and forths were like, okay, I've just started the book. Oh my gosh. And then a few weeks later, And then I remember finishing the book, and I wrote Colleen this like impassioned letter, just pouring my heart out and saying like, this is why I'm a filmmaker. This is why we started Wayfair Studios, to tell stories like this. And if this book, before it had become a global sensation, had already helped thousands of women leave situations like Lily was in, I knew that if we could find a way to adapt it, which we knew wasn't going to be easy, then we had the potential to impact millions of lives. And that's why I'm in this business. Nothing against just popcorn movies, but I feel like for me, I want to touch people's souls. And this book and Colleen, it reached in and touched my soul. And I wanted to pay that forward. What was interesting at the time was that this was not a big book. This was Colleen Hoover in 2019 was a secret. She was like, which is so interesting, because I kind of think of Colleen, like I think about like a woman who's about to have twins. And the twins aren't here yet, but it's very clear that she's pregnant and something amazing is about to come into this world. And Colleen had written all these books, but Hollywood had kind of just missed it. And I don't know why. And for some reason, I felt so honored to be given the opportunity to kind of discover this book before it had become such a mainstream success. And so, yeah, I remember sharing it with my wife and saying like, babe, I'm really excited. And I asked her to read the book. And then I remember sharing it with my company and like coming in and being so like overly boyishly excited, and telling all of the men, like, you guys have to read this book now. And all of them came back with just like, oh my God, I didn't know what I was going to start reading, but it touched me so deeply. Which is why I believe this isn't just a movie for women. I believe this is a movie for everybody. I really believe that this film, if a woman takes a man, if a man takes a man, I believe that everybody will be able to have the same experience, because there is something for everybody in this movie. And love doesn't discriminate, trauma doesn't discriminate, and the choices that we make and our healing are universal. And at the end of the day, it's a film about hope. So I felt hopeful after reading the book, feel hopeful after watching the movie, and I really hope that, pun intended, that comes across and that people leave the film thinking deeply, introspectively, and also feeling that there's hope for them. As we were starting to figure out who was going to be our Lily, a lot of names were thrown around. And at one point, Blake's name came up. And what I found fascinating was looking at the reactions of the various women in the room as we were talking about potential Lilies, and seeing how many of them lit up when they heard the name Blake Lively. And for me, it was really important to cast somebody as Lily who was going to be approachable, was going to be likable, and that women could relate to, while also being aspirational. That's a really hard thing to cast. Because, look, there are a lot of amazing actresses that I just don't believe women relate to. And Lily had to be a mix of confident and strong and funny and charismatic and sarcastic and also deep. And it takes a very unique person to be able to be all of those things.
I'd say Atlas is, he is someone who has a really strong ethical backbone. He's someone who knows who he is and knows what he values and really strives to stay as true to that as possible. I watched some cooking videos, to be honest. I didn't do anything crazy. Mostly, beyond reading the book and the script, I mean, it was interesting because I think that, part of the reason I'm probably here is that I felt like I didn't really need to do much to be Atlas, and to step into that. I kind of related to him immediately, and understood him and understood his vibe and his energy. He is a arbiter or a mirror for her. He's ultimately there is to reflect to her how strong she is and her capacity to love herself and to remind her who she is and how special she is and how badass she is. I think that's what he's there for. I love Colleen. We got on immediately, and we had some fun times. Yeah, she's such a special person. She's really, she's kind of got this like really dry, somewhat like admittedly dark sense of humor, and she's yeah, she's just such like it's like a sensitive person. Obviously, basically, she wrote this book, and you know, I just give her so much. I just admired her so much for putting herself out there, and you know, putting something like this out there that's so personal to you and is you know, based on elements of your personal life, and like throwing it out into the world, and then hoping that people receive it, and yeah, it was great to have her there, and you know, like, is this about kind of what you're thinking, you know? And she's like, yes. I'm like, all right, cool. Working with Blake, you know, it's so funny. Like, we were on Zoom, and we were talking, and I was on mute, and I didn't know that I was on mute. And she was like asking questions, and I was fully responding, and like she was telling me ideas she had, and I'm fully responding. And I also have the ability to like not really move my face or my body at all when I'm talking, and it just looks like I'm frozen. And then after 10 minutes, I'm saying things and she's not responding to me. And I was like, man, she's just totally ignoring me on this call. And then I realized I was on mute, and I was like, oh my God, I've been on mute this whole time. And then she thought that I was just like super serious and just like not answering anything she was saying. So it was really funny. Yeah, but they kind of was interesting because we both were like in fear of the same thing about one another. Like, she was like, oh my God, I hope this guy likes it, because he's like just like so serious and not saying anything. And I was like, man, she's just like not listening to anything I'm saying. And it couldn't be further from the opposite. I mean, further from the show. I mean, we just got on really well, and she's just like a force of life, like truly. And honestly, we didn't really talk much about our characters in that sense. We would talk about scenes and figure out like dynamics, but I think we both just sort of like trusted each other and knew that we were in it and right for it. And we luckily had a lot of chemistry and you know, really vibed and listened to each other and worked off of each other. And, you know, and also helped for me as Atlas, because I'm just, you know, I'm looking at her and I'm also just seeing like, you know, a woman who just recently had a kid, and she's got her children running around, and she's, you know, trying to make this movie, and it's just, it felt, you know, it just humanizes everything to the point where it's like, even me as Brandon, I'm like, I just want to show up for this person and be here for them and be present, and you know, because she's dealing with a lot, you know. I'm just here, so yeah, it's just it's honestly like a really profoundly beautiful experience working with her. Yeah, she's a special one.
Allysa is loyal, open, warm, honest, filled with energy. I think she's really considerate, but she doesn't have a lot of space for nonsense. And she's a pretty flexible person. And she's really strong, and she uses her heart as often as she can. I think she's like really like heart forward. The other thing I really love about her is that she's really excited by the luxury she's able to experience because her husband has sort of hit the jackpot. but she's not pretentious, and she also allows herself like kind of unlimited treats without being spoiled. And she's just kind of like, I didn't marry my husband for the money. He didn't have it when I met him. I would still be with him if he didn't have it. But yeah, I am gonna get this Versace dress if like that's what's happening. You know, like she's kind of unapologetic about enjoying herself. And that said, I love how, you know, she's really honest. She clearly sees that having a flower shop is this stranger's dream when she first meets Lily, and she just sort of loses her filter for a second. Is just like, I don't like flowers. And later you come to find out why, and it's a bit of a heartbreak, but yeah, I love Alyssa's vibe. We first meet Allysa when she wanders into what will eventually be the flower shop, Lily Blooms. And she's been wandering by this place, wondering what it will be. And I love that because it shows her as an inquisitive and imaginative person. And those are qualities that Lily would really find important in a friend. Yeah, she sort of stumbles into Lily's life and directly asks to be there. She really just goes in and asks for a job. She doesn't need the money. She just wants the experience. One of the main draws to this project, I mean, other than like, I've never really been in a movie like this before, or played a character like this before, was that I just really wanted to work with Blake. And it was such a joy. It was just such a joy, and I learned so much from her. She's so clear-headed while also being like just truly percolating with ideas. She's incredibly creative in a really vibrant, hands-on way, and handles a lot at once, and is just like very, very generous, a very warm person, and I prefer that. I mean, it would be weird for me to be like, I like people who are cold and don't share. I'm into deprivation. I want my on-set relationships to be horrible. Yeah, I mean, she's really fun. I really have never been in a movie like this before. And a lot of the way that I choose what I do is like trying to do things that are new and interesting, if there is that appetite. I try to go towards that. And yeah, I just, there was a lot about this film that was new for me. I'm usually making like indie films, I feel like, or I spend a lot of time doing stand-up. I've worked a lot in TV, but I haven't made many movies that are like, where the, you know, first of all, like the source material, the intellectual property is like this big, huge thing, you know, that just has not, that hasn't really happened for me. And I was really excited to see what it was like from the inside, and also to play a character who like wears really fancy things. While I do think I'm like really spirited, I have a lot of energy, maybe in a different way than Allysa does. Maybe I'm more of just a full-on ADHD disaster in that way. But it was like exciting to me to just play someone who was like really done up, but also natural in that, like, yeah, she loves all of her treasures because they're new for her and she wants to wear them around, like kind of like a little poodle. What comes naturally to her is like having fun, and she like really, really wants close relationships. And so while I was like, whoa, this feels like a big movie with like, you know, like a really successful book, and I'll be acting across from Blake, and you know, like it feels like really, really exciting. It also has like a very real heart, and that was really exciting to me. And then I found that heart was like in the performers as well. Like I saw that heart in Blake, and it was really nice. It Ends With Us is the story of a woman trying to realize her creative potential and get over her past trauma, and give her heart to a new man while also still feeling more and more reminded of and eventually drawn to her very first love. And it's about their love triangle and the complications there. It's very romantic. It's also rather devastating. There are parts of it that are scary and sad. And I think it's a really hopeful film. And it sort of like works all of the areas of the heart.
I've seen the movie and I don't think I could be happier. I think that they blew my expectations out of the water, honestly. I think it's a very faithful adaptation, and I think the readers and the people who love this book are going to be blown away and excited and heartbroken and all of the things I was hoping for it, they pulled it off. I feel like readers know what they know what they want to see when it comes to a book that they're so passionate about. And I think a lot of times that can be overlooked. But Justin, from the very beginning, was so adamant on including them because they're the ones, who made the book see the success it saw. And so it's very important that you capture the things that they loved in the movie. And they involved, had a contest and involved several readers in getting to be there for the script reading. And they were very open and receptive to their feedback. I know that their feedback actually changed some of the things in the script for the better. And I just thought that was brilliant. Who better to tell you how the script is and what they want to see in the book than the readers themselves who have been there from the very beginning. I didn't know that Blake was who I hoped would be Lily until they told me that Blake was going to be Lily, and then it was like, no one could have been more perfect. I'm a huge fan of hers, have been since, the early Gossip Girl days, and then I've seen, I think, everything that she's been in. She's a phenomenal actress, and I knew bringing her on board, she would portray the character well, but also breathe new life into the character, which is exactly what she did. I can't imagine at this point, now that I've seen it, especially anyone else being in that role. I watched Justin on Jane the Virgin in his role of Raphael, and you love that character. He's so, he's so wonderful. And Justin in general, like, I'm just a fan of his, on his Instagram and his TikTok pages, and it was kind of scary. I was like, no, I don't want to see you get angry. I don't want to see you be mean. But, the whole time that I've been thinking about this movie and who could play the characters, like, honestly, you need someone in the role of Ryle who it's going to hurt when you see them not be who you wish they could be. I felt that in my dad. My dad was this very good-looking, charismatic, like, everyone loved him. And it's like, why can't you just be this in every aspect of your life? Like, he was a good dad, but then you also want him to be a good husband. And so with Justin playing that role, it was honestly perfect, even though I did not want to see him do those things and be in those scenes because he is such a wonderfully kind human. But that's the problem with domestic violence. They're not monsters all the time. And, that's really what I wanted to capture when writing this book. My dad wasn't a monster all the time. He was a monster sometimes as a husband. And so that makes it really hard for women and men who go through that.